Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today we're going to be talking about Children of the Whales, another Netflix original. It's an interesting show, not afraid to be slow as heck at times, but does an okay job of stringing you along with various mysteries. But before we get into that, I'll give a little update on what's going on with the Don Somewhere stuff. I'm still working on the script for Kit. Like I say, that one's kind of a longer one. I'm still getting about 10 pages done per day of work. I'm a little optimistic maybe I'll get some more stuff done today. Friday has become kind of my catch-all day. I am ahead of schedule on Steve still, plan to get ahead of production as of this weekend because I don't have anything kind of in the way. Claudia's going out of town to be with her family for a little while, so I'm just going to be home alone with nothing to do but draw a boy in a hot dog suit. So that's going to be my weekend. Maybe I'll be super duper lucky and I'll draw 2 Steve comics in 2 days. It's very unlikely, but maybe that'll happen. It'll probably lead to a lot of hand cramping, so maybe not. Anyway, though, yes, Steve is doing okay. I want to say gaining some momentum, getting more viewers. On the previous comic, Steve got like 4,000 views on Imgur, which was pretty good. I tried posting Steve to Funny Junk, got like 3,000 views there. Those sites are very sensitive to whether or not people like or dislike the comic. With Imgur, I find that I've gotten it figured out. It depends on what tags you put it in. You got to give it the appropriate tag so it goes to the audience that wants to see that kind of stuff. And then one thing I did recently, like the last one, is only got about 300 views or something like that right now. Because what happened was I posted the original version, but I forgot to put the tags in it. So I deleted the post, and then I reposted it. And with the original post, I got like the fans of the comic came in and they immediately upvoted it, so it got a bunch of upvotes. But then I deleted that, and the repost, nobody came in to upvote that because those fans that I'll show up to do that initial upvoting, they'd already come and gone. They'd already seen the comic, so they didn't upvote again. So then some other guy came along and just immediately downvoted it, and then it had 0 points and it was just gone from like Imgur's pages. So like you can. If you don't post it, if the first person to see your comic doesn't like it, they can really they can just make it vanish. So that's a thing. But last time got 100 upvotes, 4,000 views. That's good. That's promising for Steve. We're also starting to get really ambitious with Steve. It's been labeled as a superhero comic for quite a while, and if you've seen the latest page, we've got the characters in like a suit of like armor on like a jet and stuff like that. This is all stuff that's getting harder to draw. We've got like more dynamic poses. We're gonna have things coming up, and it's all a little past my skill to draw. So lots of work, lots of effort, lots of stuff to learn from, and yeah, Steve's been good for me. You don't improve without pushing your limits and trying to go past your comfort zones. So I slightly dread it, but I'm also looking forward to it because once I'm done, I'll be that much better at my work. Let's see, what else is going on? Copy has begun work on the comic. We're done with the concept phase. Right now she's kind of feeling out how she wants to produce the comic. I haven't had a chance to look at her work, but we're going to be getting into production with Kit pretty soon here. So then once she feels comfortable with the way that she's going to do her workflow and she figures out exactly how many comics she feels like she can do a week, the idea is to do enough comics that she's not overwhelmed, because I don't want to get in like these posting schedules where you just do as much as physically possible and then one day you get a cold and you just fall behind schedule and you're not posting anymore. I'd rather that you get a little bit ahead, and that's why Steve is two a day. Because if I raised it to like 3 a day, like I think I could do 3 a week, but if I raised it to 3 a week, then as soon as I slowed down or as soon as I had a bad day, I would just fall off the rails. So yes, we'll see where Copy gets the level of art that she wants to work at, and her comfort zone based on the amount that she can put into work. Anyway, though, Kit's looking forward to Kit. Pencils is nearly done with his work for IDW. He still probably needs a final confirmation on that, but last I heard, he's only got a few pages left to draw, and he's gonna send that off to them, and then they'll either approve it or not. But from what I hear, it sounds like he's on a pretty good track and hasn't had any problems with approval. I think that he's worked really hard and he's put a lot of heart and soul into it. He really wants to look good. He really believes in it and wants to make a great impression. I mean, like, the way he broke in, if you think about it, like the whole thing where people are like, oh, they should hire Pencils, you know, he's better than Foskett, that kind of thing, like, you know, that it's really, I mean, that's one of the kinds of things, like, if you get in on that sort of, like, very aggressive sort of, like, everyone's like, you know, this guy's better than this guy and whatever, you know, you got to take it to heart. Pencils is actually, he's a very kind guy, and, I think that, you know, he definitely wants to make that really good first impression, so he wants to get in there and just do, like, a really great comic, so, yeah, like I said, I've seen examples of some stuff that he's done, and it looks really good. He's nearly done, and then he's going to go back to his Anon Pi adventure quite soon. And another thing that he's been doing is in his spare time, what started off as, very briefly, was a joke, was Pencils was like, what would a Peyton Dakimakura look like? And I was like, well, she'd snuggle an RPG. And so Pencil started drawing a Peyton Dakimakura, and now we haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do with it yet, but it looks really good. So, I don't know. Maybe at the end of the Semi-Intelligent comic, I'll throw up some links, and you guys, if you want, you can buy yourselves a Peyton Dakimakura. Ironically, of course. I mean, it's unironically a very good-looking drawing, but ironically, you can own your own Peyton Dakimakura, or a nice little pinup of Peyton in a sexy outfit holding an RPG. So yes. Anyway, fun stuff. Looking ahead. Like I said, I'm getting close to being done with the first book of Kit, and then once we do, like I said, we're going back to Let's Plays, and then once I get ahead on Steeb, which I'd like to get at least one whole week ahead of production on Steeb. Then I'll go back and I'll start working on the animations. So probably next month is when we're going to see animations and Let's Plays come back. And then Claudia and I have been talking about going on a vacation. She and I didn't really do a honeymoon after we got married. And so, you know, we've got the baby on the way. We're thinking about taking a week and, you know, just having our honeymoon before the baby arrives. We're not entirely sure where we want to go. I was kind of thinking about going out to like Zion National Park. I thought it would be nice. It's getting tough though. Claudia's starting to get to the point where the baby is wearing on her musculature a little bit, and so it makes her tired and you know, achy a little bit. But the baby's kicking, and that's kind of fun. Sometimes, like when we're sitting together watching shows, she'll take my hand, she just puts it on her stomach, and I can feel the baby kick. So yeah, totally great. Our neighbors also just had a baby. This is kind of a funny thing. Before I started recording, I mean, like, we're both looking forward to our future son, but also we kind of get those reminders every now and then. We're like, oh, it's gonna be so cute. Oh God, it's gonna be so horrible. So like, my neighbor has a newborn, and I just heard them like going from the car to the house, and the baby just wailing. And it's like, oh man. There's a lot ahead of us. So, yeah. Anyway, point is, I'll always try to keep keep the comic production ahead of schedule, so that way there's room to do other things and to wiggle and to work on other projects and not have to constantly panic about whether or not things are going to be on time. So, Yes. Like I say, next month expect some animations. Not as many animations, or not as hardcore dedication to animations as before, but just some animation stuff, and the Let's Plays will come back. So, yeah, Children of the Whales, the thing that I said that I was going to talk about. So, Children of the Whales, it's an interesting anime where all the boys look like girls and everyone dies young. And it's interesting, I think, mainly because of two things. It has sort of a neat setting. It's placed in like a desert sea. Like, the sea is made of sand. And then they're on an island that like floats, and it looks like a boat, and they call it the Whale. And it's like a big like just rocky island type thing, and they just like grow crops on it and stuff like that. And it's populated functionally by children, because everyone dies in their mid-20s, except for a very small select group of people who then wind up being like on the council of government or whatever, because they live for long enough to remember what the heck they were trying to do. You know, you create this like 5-year road program, and then all the engineers die in 5 years. So you got these people here, you know, they've got to build the roads on the Whale, and you know, the roads don't go very far, but you have to build them anyway. So yeah, the setting is kind of interesting, and so for the earliest parts, you're kind of going along with it because you're exploring the setting. But then they run into, like, there's this other floating island, and this actually raises questions later on when they explain what the floating islands are. But there's another floating island that comes in range, and they go to it, and they're like, yeah, let's go and strip all the supplies off of that floating island. And they find, like, a girl on the floating island. And they're like, oh, some random girl. Okay, weird. And it turns out that what these floating islands are is they're like ships. There's this nation of people with these magical creatures called the Noose. Oh, by the way, I should point out, if you want to watch Children of the Whales, you should do it before you watch this video, because I feel like when I explain the setting and the mysteries, there will be no further reason to actually watch Children of the Whales, because all that you'll have left is a lot of really slowly paced kind of things going on. And like I say, the pacing, like, Children of the Whales is not afraid to be slow as all heck. It really doesn't mind wasting your time or chewing the fat. So anyway, though, so they go on this island, and they find this little girl, and then she explains, like, oh, these islands are actually boats that our nation's people use to travel across the great desert sea. And inside them is, like, a monster called the Noose that devours emotions. And so all people go and they give their emotions to the Noose, and then the Noose will pilot the ship. And that's how that works. And everyone's like, oh, that's interesting. And she goes, yeah, except for you guys. You guys all have your emotions. And from what I read in the storybooks, it's a terrible, awful place where everyone is always feeling things. And that super sucks. And I accepted that on a logical basis because they said it and I didn't have any logical ability to doubt. Like, one of the things that they do is the villains of the story are functionally people who have no feelings. And this creates a very weird problem writing-wise for the show. And this is why I say that, like, the pacing is not really all that good, but the mystery is kind of what keeps you going. Because they have these villains show up, and they're, like, on another ship. They show up, and they're like, oh, we're gonna kill everyone, you know? And they don't really explain why they want to kill everyone on the whale. But the mud whale, I guess, is the official name for it. Just the whale. They want to kill everyone on the whale. And so they show up to kill everyone on the whale, and none of them have any emotions whatsoever. So, and they all wear masks. So it's like they may as well be, I don't know, attacked by, like, Terminator robots, except for they're, like, much, much slower and much more efficient. Like, at least the Terminator robots, you could kind of see their motivation. But for the soulless, emotionless people, like, there was no logical advantage to this slaughter. As far as I could tell. I think it's not until later that they reveal that certain people still have emotions. So this whole decision to kill the whale was actually some stupid emotional choice that some guy made for his own personal reasons. But everyone else just kind of goes along with it because they're like, oh, we have orders, so let's follow the orders. But one of the emotions that they seem to lose is a sense of urgency. So all these soldiers, they land on the whale. And, you know, by this point, you've had a couple of episodes to get to know the main characters, and so that some of the main characters get shot with arrows and they die, and then other main characters continue to live. The main character, of course, survives throughout the entire series. But once they arrive, like, you'd think that an emotionless fighting force, in theory, this would be very powerful, because they would just land and they would swiftly move from objective to objective, completing everything as quick as they can. But when you lose the emotion that allows you to feel a sense of urgency, what turns out actually happens is you land on the mud whale, and then you stand around doing frickin' nothing until someone explicitly tells you to go do something else. Because morale's not just low, morale doesn't exist. Morale is a concept that is totally alien to you. So you show up, and they're like, alright, complete our objective. And the last thing that you were told to do was to set foot on the whale, so you did. And so, like, there's just these scenes where, like, the characters are having these emotional breakdowns over their friends dying, and they get to, like, soliloquize, is that a word? Soliloquy? They get to monologue about it, and they're just like, you killed my friend! You're the worst people I've ever met! I'm just furious with you! And, like, all the soldiers are just standing around with their weapons, and they're not moving or anything, which must save a lot on the animation budget. And so they're just, like, holding perfectly still, and they're just like, yeah, you know, not really motivated to murder the whale. I was sent here, they told me to land, and I landed. And there's no sense of, like, fear or, like, anything. Like, they're not taking cover, they're not, like, establishing a position. They're not doing anything. So, like, the whole slaughter is just kind of like, it doesn't feel like it's really very meaningful, and the only people with any drive happen to be the people on the whale. So, I think they defend themselves. I don't really exactly recall how many times they get attacked or what they do, because every time they do it, it always feels like just kind of this empty, like, pointless gesture that they're making. There's no real, like, I don't know, one side has no investment whatsoever in the battle. So, yeah, but there is a character that they have show up, and he is super obnoxious, and I hated him with all of my soul. And not, like, in a love-to-hate him sort of way, but in, like, I just want him to not be on camera anymore type of way. It's this little, like, pink-haired kid who I'm gonna call Mr. Shrieky. And Mr. Shrieky shows up, and he's just like, "Wee! I'm on the mud whale! I'm here to be on the mud whale!" And he also doesn't have any motivation, but I think that his thing was that when he went to go see the noose and have his emotions stolen, for whatever reason, the noose just gave him a lot more emotions. And so he always runs around with, like, he's, like, blushing all the time. I'm not sure if they're meaning to imply that he's drunk, or if he's, like, sexually aroused, or maybe both at once. But it doesn't matter because clearly, like, he doesn't follow orders. Like, people tell him what to do, and then he just, like, goes and runs off and does his own thing. And it's not even, like, a productive thing. Like, he mostly just, like, shrieks about how much fun he's having killing people. He's like, "I am definitely enjoying killing people! Everybody! Everyone, like, look at me! Look at me!" And, man, the best moments are when he's not on camera. So yes, like, this kid, he's super pointless. He gets introduced. Oh yeah, they definitely did have 2 attacks. So he gets introduced in the first attack, and he's like, "Hello, I'm Mr. Shrieky," and then everyone's like, "Go home, Mr. Shrieky," and Mr. Shrieky's like, "I don't want to go home," and then, like, the commander shows up, and he's like, "Go home, Mr. Shrieky," and Mr. Shrieky's like, "Okay, boss, if you say so." And so they all get, freaking Roxo, the rock and roll clown, but less funny. He gets on the boat again, and they're like, "We'll come back in like 2 days." He's like 12 years old. He's not even, I mean, he doesn't even, like, look intimidating. He doesn't do anything intimidating. And so, like, everyone's like, "Oh no, we've got 2 days to prepare," or it was a week or something like that. I think it was a week. They're like, "We've got a week to prepare for an attack. Like, what do we do?" And so they all get a bunch of sticks, and they're like, hoo ha, training montage. Let's all learn to paddle. And so they get ready for the fight. And again, the girl's like, "Oh, you people are gonna get slaughtered, like, they're just an elite training force, and they're gonna just come in here and they're gonna be unstoppable. Unless the animation is very expensive, in which case they're going to be totally stopped." And it turns out that combat fight scenes are really expensive, so when the next battle comes along, the enemy is totally stopped by the budget. They can't move at all. They arrive, and there's too many people to draw, so they all just hold still, and they wait for, like, they do close-ups on the characters' faces because that's much cheaper to animate. And the characters are like, "Here I am, like, here's how I feel, allow me to explain." And then they do a close-up of the guy holding perfectly still, not moving, he's just listening politely, because that requires the least amount of animation. And then, it says, and so what they decide to do is that they're going to sneak onto the enemy boat and then kill their noose. And the enemy has this brilliant plan. Like, if you kill the noose, then their boat will sink, and everyone on the boat, I don't know, presumably dies, except they actually don't for some reason. But anyway, though, so they all get on the boat, and the enemy has this brilliant master plan. Let them get all the way to the noose, and then attack them. And so they let them get all the way to the noose, and then the good guys kill the noose. So, totally unforeseen turn of events. Brilliant strategist. Didn't pan out for the enemy. I don't know why that was their plan, but it totally was. And anyway, though, it also turns out that, like, some blue-haired guy that's traveling with the group is some sort of legendary, like, soldier creature or something like that is spawned by the noose. Oh, by the way, the noose creates people? I guess? It's kind of difficult to explain, but they're freaking useless. They're assholes. They just show up and they're like, "Here's a little bit more mystery." Mostly they just arrive to drop breadcrumbs so that you keep watching from series to series to series. Like, they don't even fully explain everything. Like I say, I think that some people might really like it because they kind of like that string of mystery sort of thing doing, which they do reasonably well. But I personally like I watched it all the way through, and I admit that they earned the viewership. They had a good enough system that they earned the viewership. But I would never watch it twice. And if they come out with a sequel, I might begrudgingly watch it just to get a little bit more of the breadcrumb trail. But yeah, in retrospect, when I think of everything I learned, I'm a little let down. So anyway, though, yeah, it turns out like blue-haired guy is some kind of creature is made to battle people specifically, and so they all battle it. And then the noose that's on the enemy ship is like, hey, main character, like, do you want to give me your emotions? And then the main character's like, no. And then the noose is like, oh, you passed my test. Here's a cat. And he gives the guy a cat. And now this is actually funny because in like the second episode, he actually finds one of these cats on the first island where they found the girl. And so he's just hanging around with this cat, and they keep talking about like, if we get really hungry, I guess we could eat it. Like, they don't know what it is. It's just this like cat thing. And so by the time they get the second cat, they come back to the mud whale. And Mr. Shrieky has been just ridiculous. He's been completely defeated. Like, he gets his one scene where he goes on, he's like, I'm gonna kill the mayor! There's a mayor, I don't remember his name. Mayor Girlman, I'm gonna say is what it was. He looks like a girl. So Mayor Girlman is like, I'm gonna kill Mayor Girlman! And then some other, like, some blonde guy with a stick shows up, and he's like, I'll never let you kill Mayor Girlman. And Mr. Shrieky's like, you can't stop me! And then Mr. Shrieky gets his ass kicked because he's not actually really a very good character. He's not really very scary, and like a good fight scene would have been expensive, so Mr. Shrieky just gets destroyed. And I thought Mr. Shrieky died, but surprise! Kind of at the end of the series, they reveal that Mr. Shrieky lived! So he'll be there for season 2, should there be another season. And I hope they kill Mr. Shrieky in season 2, if he comes back, because Mr. Shrieky sucks. So anyway, though, Mr. Shrieky, he goes as swiftly as he arrived, hated from square one, never want to see him again. And they win. The Mud Whale team wins. And again, that's because the enemy team had no sense of urgency, and they really make no progress whatsoever, and I don't know what their motive was. I think that they did explain their motive throughout the show, but it may as well be pointless. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter why they do it, because the point is the good guys win. So after the battle, everyone's kind of hanging around. They're like, so now what? And they're like, well, they'll probably attack again later on. And the girl's like, no, there's only like 8 of those ships, and you just sank one. So for them to like send another ship at you would be... I mean, like, it was a total waste to attack you in the first place, so probably that guy's gonna get fired. And sure enough, they do have like a big council meeting where the guy goes back to the home nation, and they're like, so, you lost an 1/8 of our naval fleet. What do you have to say? And the guy's like, all right, hear me out. We're gonna do it again. And they're like, why? And he's like, because there's, just go to hell, that's why. And then everyone's like, oh, that's a very sensible argument. All right, yeah, we'll give you another ship. So for no particular reason, this is them setting up for season 2. They're just like, oh, I guess, I guess that makes sense. Don't need to think about it too hard. So, yeah. Anyway, though, so the noose on the mud whale then sends the girl. There's Magic Girl. Magic Girl shows up and she's like, hey, this cat thing you have is actually a rudder that can steer the ship. And the main character's like, oh, I've had one of these since like the second episode. And she's like, yeah, but I only really felt like telling you what they do now. And so then they're like, all right, so they can steer the ship suddenly, and they don't know where to steer it to, but they just acknowledge that they can steer the ship. So they're just like, well, that's great, that's cool. And then like some other kingdom shows up with their own little like sea craft, their own little like sand sea craft, and this is the fan service episode where everyone agrees that they had a long hard battle, so they all decide to take a bath in the Mud Whale hot springs. And you think this would mean that they'd show off the girls, but they don't. You get to see a lot of Mayor Girlman. You get to see his naked ass all over the place. In fact, that Mayor Girlman is so forgetful that when the envoy from this other nation shows up, he just gets out of his bath and runs down to go talk to them while he's nude. And he keeps talking to them while he's nude until someone comments on it, and then he goes, oh gosh, am I naked? and then he hides behind a bush. And I don't know why he forgot he didn't have clothes on, or how you could forget. I mean, you would think the breeze would be notable. I thought that maybe they just had no modesty on the mud whale, but apparently he just forgot to put clothes on. So it was kind of like that stupid anime trope just applied to Mayor Girlman, and that like whole like, oh no, like I'm naked, but I'm modest, so I maintain my dignity. It was like Mayor Girlman, same thing, like, oh, I'm naked, like look at my naked body. This is as much as we can show. You don't quite get to see my penis, but you get to see all the rest of Mayor Girlman. And then after you get the full eye, as soon as you take in as much of Mayor Girlman as you possibly can without being a higher rating, then he realizes that he was naked, and oh, he's so ashamed and embarrassed. He retains his dignity. Mayor Girlman is not a slut. So, yeah. I don't know. That happens, and then, like, the envoy is all like, so how'd you like to come back to our nation? Because we actually hate the nation that you're from, and the nation you're from is trying to kill you all for no particular reason. So why don't we join forces and you just sail to our port, and that'll be that. And they're like, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. And then some of the guys are like, what if there's a reason we shouldn't do it? And then everyone's like, I can't think of one. So they go on their way, and that's kind of the setup for season 2. There's also a little thing like where right after they win the battle, one of the guys proposes like a violent mutiny. He's like, yeah, now that we're all recovering from all this death and sadness, let's go to war with ourselves. And everyone's kind of like, they're thinking about it. I mean, they're not really very much behind it, but then some other guy comes out and he's like, you're retarded, and slaps him in the face. He's like, go away, go away. And like I say, the show doesn't feel bad about being slow, so even this scene kind of doesn't have a whole lot of tension, mostly because you don't get the sense that, anyone has any motive to agree with these idiots who are trying to propose a mutiny, and then no mutiny happens, so there's kind of an anticlimax. Like, I don't know, say Mud Whale. It's interesting. It's got kind of a style to it. The setting is sort of interesting. Like, you can think that someone put a lot of thought into sort of what they wanted Mud Whale to be, and the slowness you could almost kind of forgive as just something like, well, there's this budget here, and we want to do this many episodes, and we have this much plot, and the plot calls for like these fight scenes, and if they had enough money, then maybe the fight scenes could have been really exciting, and then Mud Whale would have been like really cool at these points. But at the same time, they also kind of have these characters that are like really more obnoxious than likable, and I can't tell if it's the voice acting. Like, Mr. Shrieky is one of the worst. My take on Mr. Shrieky was that he was supposed to be like Kefka or something like that. He was like this oddball in the military who was insane and took joy from hurting people or something like that. But he really he mostly just didn't fit in. He stuck out like a sore thumb, and he was like this really awful character. And then you have these other guys that are kind of like mysterious and like saying things that imply that they know more than they're letting on. And based on what I've seen of Mud Whale in the first season, I'm going to assume that whatever information they have, it's actually going to be super underwhelming. But I think that what the show does is something that a lot of shows should do, or that any writer should do, when you decide you're going to have mystery be a major component of how you keep your viewers, is that every time they reveal one thing, they set up something else to make you wonder what's going to happen next, or that makes you wonder how that next thing's going to work. So, like, they explain that, like, they present this cat, or you find this girl, or whatever, and they do this thing, and they really don't tell you what it's about. And then when they tell you what it's about, they leave another question open. So they're like, this is the noose, you feed it your emotions. And then they kind of, like, don't explain, like, why do you feed it emotions, or whatever. Like, why does everyone on the Mud Whale still have their emotions if they've got a noose? And then, like, of course you figure out that, well, everyone's dying because they're feeding their life into the noose rather than their feelings. And so on and so forth. Like, it just keeps presenting these new answers, but with every answer they create new questions, or they create another hook entirely that's going on as sort of a side deal. And so they answer this thing, they kind of wrap that up, and they end it, and they move on to this other side question, which then leads to more questions. So the series is well written in that regard, and that it always kind of creates a new question. Some of you may disagree, but some of you may feel that Mud Whale was kind of a boring show. You may not have liked it. I can totally see that. But I can also see why people would really enjoy it and would want to see more of it, because they're kind of drawn in to this breadcrumb style writing which is done fairly okay. So that's my take on Mud Whale. As to whether or not I recommend it, I would say it's a toss-up. You could give it a shot, maybe watch it for a couple of episodes, see how you feel about it. Maybe you'll get pulled in by the breadcrumbs. Maybe I've already ruined all the breadcrumbs for you, so you wouldn't get pulled in. Maybe you might just like it anyway, just for the heck of it. But I thought it was, had some pros and cons, potential there, room for improvement, really hated some characters, didn't really love anyone particularly. I mean, like, when your villains are all required to have no feelings, that's tough. Like, you can't really love someone as a character who feels nothing, And that was sort of that's a very, very risky thing to decide. Like that's like battling robots. And then, like I say, if there was this situation with the enemy soldiers who had no emotions, where they were just very efficient, where they just like start at one side of the ship and just move completely across, and there's like no slowdown whatsoever, you would get that feeling of like, oh god, this is really scary. But because of the animation budget and the way that they want to have the characters monologue about their feelings so much, instead they just feel really slow and really efficient, and like they don't know what they're doing. It's like robots that aren't programmed very well. It's like they go on their ship, and then, you have to keep an eye on them, because sometimes, there's no invisible walls on the sides of the ships, and sometimes they just walk off the ship. They're a little bit stupid. They don't, they're not very intimidating at all. They don't create that sort of presence. So, yeah. Anyway, that's my take on Mud Whale, and also that's the news and the progress on what's going on with Dawn Somewhere. So, I suppose that'll be it for today. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll catch you all next time.